Hi everyone, welcome to Value. So today we're going to look at a company called IronNet, and this is a company pioneering the future of cybersecurity, and it is an amazing company, definitely one you should stay tuned for. But we're going to firstly talk about the listing itself. So IronNet just listed as a SPAC merger on Friday the 27th of August, so there's not really a lot of information on it currently on the listing, but in a few days time there will be more. But the main detail that's missing is the 1.5 billion valuation for the company, which I think is kind of a little bit undervalued and hugely undervalued for what it could become in the future. They've also done some really great slides comparing themselves with their peers, and based on that comparison they are hugely undervalued, but I'll let you be the judge. But today I'm just going to talk about some of the main details of the company, and of course I definitely advise you to do some research in the company as well. Alright, let's jump into this company. Alright, so IronNet, as you can read here, becomes a publicly traded company after completing the SPAC merger with LGL Systems Acquisition Corp. Those of you who are familiar with SPACs will know what I mean when we say a SPAC merger, but if you don't know what a SPAC merger it is, basically a SPAC is a empty company that is just a shell. It has some money in it and it looks to acquire another company that wants to become public, and they merge together and help that company become a public company. And now they've basically done it with a company called IronNet, who was founded in 2014 by former NSA Director General Keith Alexander. So you've actually got a general behind this, a retired general, but nonetheless a general behind this company, which is pretty amazing. So definitely, when you see someone of that caliber start up a company who has been in this area for many decades, pioneering this, it's pretty amazing to be able to get an investment into this type of company. Alright, so we'll go through the slides. There is 28 slides, so we probably won't go through all of these in detail, but you can definitely search it up. Just go to LGL Systems Acquisition Corp website and they will have the PowerPoint there, and you can just go through it slide by slide in your own time. But the main information that you really need to know is their merger value was 927 million, not counting the cash. Once you count the cash of 267 million that gets injected with this merger, it actually brings them to a 1.2 billion valuation. But as it's usually done with SPACs, they start at $10 at a $12.59 price tag. That is about 26% increase on that 1.2, hence how we get that 1.5 billion valuation at the current price. Alright, so this is the LGL Systems Acquisition Corp. So you've got all these pretty well experienced people who have founded companies, and these are the guys that will be helping the public listing and being the face of that, because mostly that's the whole idea of a SPAC. You've got people who are really good at the public listed side, and they kind of help facilitate this and help make it easier for the kind of private companies to become a public company without the hassle of trying to learn everything about a public company. Alright, and so here we go. So General Keith Alexander is a co-CEO and chairman, and he is also on the board of Amazon, which is, that itself is also amazing. So we've got a man who's got a huge reputation, knows what he's talking about. So world leading cybersecurity expert and founder of US Cyber Command. And then we've also got the other co-CEO and board member. He is a former president of Duo and COO of Zscaler, which is also cybersecurity as well. So you're in really good hands. Very experienced leadership team. Current revenues are around about $54 million. So it says FY22. Their financial year ends in the end of January for 2021. So the FY 2022 is actually the calendar year of 2021. So for 2021, for that 12 months, we're actually expecting about $54 million, which isn't too bad. But we're going to look at the revenue projections, and the revenue projections are actually quite nice and exciting as well. Alright, so let's jump into this. So how is this company different from other companies? Well, other companies, as they put, is basically very single-minded in a sense. Like, you see all these big names, and you'll probably recognize a few of them if you know this area of cybersecurity. And usually these companies target one company, offer them a product, and they can kind of just look through their own data, and that's the main focus of their products, just looking at one company and solely focus on that one company with their product. Whereas with IronNet's kind of different. So the problem is, if you just have if you have a product that kind of sorts out one company's cybersecurity, it may not be able to be that good. It might not be that good because, in a sense, it's really isolated in what's out there. It only knows the data that's available inside that company, so it doesn't actually have the most advanced idea of what's out there in a true sense. With IronNet, they put all their customers' data together and encrypt it in a certain way to make it anonymous and to make it available to everyone. So if you imagine, say like with these other companies, they will have one company, and that company doesn't actually have any more data than it has than the current product that's provided to them. But with IronNet, this company actually has data provided to them from all the customers of IronNet. So then you actually have this really comprehensive solution that even if your company's not being attacked, or your data is not being manipulated in a certain way, you will still be aware of it, because potentially another company in a different industry is seeing that, and that data will actually be available to those companies. So you can kind of see, like, initially it's not as intuitive, it's not as straightforward in terms of how this is done, but if you think about it a bit more, these main companies focus on just the data inside that company. IronNet focuses on data on all the companies combined, which is the really awesome part. They have this slide up here. So as you can see, they put all the data together and then they class it into different data points. They've put, as on the very right of this slide here, 2,089 indicators of compromise reported. And then through those data points, 112,000 cumulative threats intel reports developed. So by putting all these companies and all your data together, they actually managed to create all these reports that is available to everyone. So even though your company might not be at any threat in the current moment, the current threats will be available to you, and you will be more aware in advance than if you were to have other solutions that didn't give you that same awareness. So their solution is building a whole system of data using an AI-driven behavioral analytics platform, and it helps you stay way ahead of it just in a sense it just helps you stay way ahead in the case that there could be future attacks on your platform, which we kind of see is happening quite a lot these days. So that's why it's quite a cool company in that sense, and the addressable market just gets larger. So current addressable market is $25 billion, and that's growing at 12.9% every year to 2024, when it will be as large as $41 billion as the addressable market. So they're in a growing industry, and they're pioneering a very, very amazing product going forward. Yeah, so as it's put, they have 10,000 potential cornerstone customers with 100,000 potential community customers. So these guys have a lot of people they can have as their customers, and they do actually have a lot of good customers. So for enterprises, they have top global technology companies, 2 of the top 3 largest hedge funds. So obviously they're not going to name these customers, because by naming these customers, it kind of gives away the strategy. And the one thing about keeping a good, safe platform is not to give away the strategy. And maybe the customers may not want to be named as well. So this is a very nice way to just name the customers without naming them. So a top 5 largest investment manager, 8 of the top 10 energy companies, global European bank, and then you've got countries as well, like governments like Japan, Bahrain, Singapore, 2 Department of Defense branches, 4 US state agencies, and they've got plenty of these partners as well. So you can see there is a lot of big names associated with this company. And as you see with the revenue, currently 2021, they're expecting $54 million. Next year they expect $111 million, which is just above that 100% growth rate. And after that they expect $185 million in revenue, and he followed that by $287 million. So you can see the growth is phenomenal for this company, especially in what they do. Especially since they're pioneering something new, and they're seeing this amount of growth. Like the prior year revenue was 29 million, so 29 million jumping to 54 million is quite impressive. So if we look at this kind of diagram that they put together, their growth rate over that 2 years, from 2021 to 2023, is expected on average to be 96%, whereas you see these large established players, these first 3 are around about $40 billion companies. CrowdStrike is about $60 billion company, and their revenues range from $500 to $1 billion. So a lot more than IronNet. IronNet's at 54 million, so they at least have 10 to 20 times more revenue than IronNet. But they're growing a lot slower. They're growing at just above 30%. And a company that like we know very well is Palantir. Palantir is a phenomenal company, and their growth rate is over the next 2 years will be about 32%. And C3AI, which I find will be the most comparable company, is growing at about 31%. So in terms of growth, no other cybersecurity company is growing as quick as IronNet. So I want you to consider that. So out of the growth, IronNet is superior and by far the fastest growing cybersecurity company on this list here in terms of established players. And they're also pioneering something that is way ahead of everyone else. So their kind of products are not going to get outdated. Over time, their product's going to be the necessary product, and which is going to make the future value of this company to be much, much higher than the current $1.5 billion. So to put together a valuation here based on their peers are being valued at 30 to 40 times revenue, which they see for the valuation. They kind of see minimum 1.6 billion and a maximum of 2.2 billion. So already they already see their current valuation to be slightly lower. They see themselves to be undervalued in that sense. They see themselves potentially being over a $2 billion company now. Never mind what's based on the future. Just on the current value versus their peers, they already see themselves being undervalued based on the current multiples. Never mind that IronNet is actually growing a lot quicker. They're just based on the current multiples of what's available on the market, they're already undervalued already. Now I technically see this company being closer to $3 billion in terms of market valuation, because they're growing much quicker in that sense. But even if you say, if we don't take the growth factor into account, even just on a revenue basis, they are still undervalued. We will compare against a company like C3AI, who is one of the other companies in this area that are doing something pretty advanced, and they were about $183 million in revenue, so about just over 3 times the revenue, and they have a valuation of $5.25 billion in valuation, which would be well over 3 times IronNet. But we also have to take into the fact that, hey, IronNet is actually growing 3 times quicker than C3AI. So you have to consider that as well over the next 2 years, of course. So if we consider that that C3AI goes to, $2.5 billion, $250 million in revenue in next year, and we consider that IronNet goes to, say, 111 million, then the revenues over time are just going to catch up much quicker. That by the time C3AI reaches 300 million, IronNet won't be that far behind. They will be at 185 million, and in probably in the next 5 years we could possibly see IronNet catch up with C3AI. So hence why we're looking at a 1.5 here and a $5 billion company, and in the next 5 years I think they'll catch up. But of course it depends on how long you want to be a shareholder of such a company for, but I think the longer you can be a shareholder of such a company that is pioneering the future of cybersecurity, that kind of bodes very, very well going forward, especially being a shareholder. And you just have to look at the valuations and the comparisons that they've done with these companies, and IronNet posts some of the best growth metrics around in terms of margins are fairly equal in all of them, so they're all around at 70%, 70 to 80, which is probably fair. But in terms of growth, IronNet is pioneering the future of this, and potentially they can become a very, very large company going forward. So that's mostly what I really wanted to talk about. We could, I guess one point out of part we can also consider is the total operating expenses. So they are basically operating at a loss currently. Their current loss will be expected to be $47 million, and in next year they expect to lose $91 million. So they do expect to be losing money over time as they continue to go on. Like every year in the next few years, they do expect to be losing money. But that is more in a sense of that they are going to be putting a lot of money into sales and marketing, and also research and development. So that's quite normal in this sense. But I imagine they can continue to raise a lot more money as well. But currently they will have well over $260 million. They will have cash themselves, and given that they currently just raised $267 million, and then they'll have more money in their own funds as well, they should be able to last at least another 2 years before they need more funding. Though sometimes if the stock does really well, they might choose to raise earlier, or potentially they may not generate as much revenue, or their costs could be much higher. So potentially they might need to raise money after another year's time, or potentially in 2 years' time. So it's always good to be aware of these things as well. At the end of the day, these numbers are projections. They may not actually attain these numbers, or they potentially could do better. Just depends on the current environment, of course. But I think the current environment is probably in favor of them, because a lot of people, a lot of companies in general are getting hacked, and you need much more comprehensive solutions going forward. I don't know about their pricing compared to their competitors, which could also be a big influencing factor as well. But so far, this company has managed to get some considerably big clients in terms of large enterprises, governments, and they've got some very well-known partners as well. So that's what I'm kind of seeing. I'm seeing a very well, run company, run by a general with a lot of experience. They've got some very large customers, which you have to do a lot of convincing to really get these customers. And if they're convinced, then why wouldn't an investor be convinced in that sense? Because you would probably think these enterprises or governments or partners would do more due diligence before letting a company into their data, giving them access to their data. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts about this company are, and if you've got any questions or comments, just post below. Until then, good luck investing, everyone.